This is your reminder that the BBC has yet to address the consistent transphobic leanings in its news coverage, and while the team behind Doctor Who is not connected to this in any way since this is a BBC-owned property, I'm going to keep pointing it out until the problem gets resolved. Links in a pinned comment below if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'll stop saying it when it stops being a problem. Boy, have I got a lot to cover with this one. Let's do it. Okay, you know what? I know it wasn't the exact same suit as he used to be in, but props to David Tennant for still fitting in a suit that skinny, because I can't anymore. Granted, I've had more specific changes to my body than he would have had in the years. Anyways, the Star Beast. First of the Doctor Who specials to mark the 60th anniversary. First experience of any extended length with the 14th Doctor, the return of David Tennant. We have the return of Donna. We have the introduction of a bunch of new characters. We have the integration of a creature that has been known within the deep lore of Doctor Who for some time with the Meep. There's a lot. There's a lot here. I have no idea how long this is going to run, and the review's probably going to be a little bit scattershot. I should also give you a spoiler warning up at the front end. Like, if you haven't seen it, you should. I'll do kind of a brief synopsis at the front end, but then I'm just going to start talking about whatever I decide to do next. And it's probably going to be all over the place. But we have the 14th Doctor show up and immediately runs into Donna. We immediately establish Donna's daughter of Rose, who I like a lot. We'll come back to her. We encounter the husband, Sean, who we have met before but didn't really get to know. I like him a lot. I don't know if I'll remember to bring him up later, so I'm going to say this now. What I really love about Sean is just he's the epitome of, okay, well, let's roll with it.
Something smells nice.
Tuna madras.
I figure that's the kind of person you have to be to have a successful relationship with Donna, and it works. It works really well, and it's just nice to see, especially because so often in the more recent era of Doctor Who since the reboot, relationships that companions have had have often felt interruptive to things. They felt like an intrusion in some way. Not all of them. I actually think better of Danny Pink than most, and they did actually integrate Rory and Amy as a couple, but oftentimes romantic entanglements of the companions feel like, why does this need to be here? And you don't get enough of a sense of the relationship to even really get why they're together. Here, no, absolutely. He doesn't get that much screen time, but I get it, and I see why they work. We have the return of Donna's mother, Sylvia. She gets reestablished. Now, of course, the Doctor running into Donna is throwing him off a bit, because as we get a full reminder of at the start, so this is very clearly being set up as a jumping on point, it's all presented in a way that feels very, look, here's the bullet points that you need if this is where you're starting. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can go back and check out on a completely different platform if you're in the US, but there's a bunch of other stuff you can check out that'll go into all this, but here's the bullet points, here's what you need, let's go. I think that was a solid way to start. And so we have a crash ship that Donna misses, and I kind of love that they're sticking with that, that Donna just by quirk of fate misses everything. There's a spaceship burning up on re-entry directly behind her, and she's down here messing with boxes and restacking things. Yeah, we know that's what her life is like, and I like that it establishes that it kind of continues to be that. So we've got all that, and of course, from an escape pod from that ship, we have the Meep. Now, as I alluded to before, the Meep is actually kind of a deep cut. The Meep originates from comics, I believe, that were in Doctor Who magazine. They originate in some comic form. So that's where both the Meep and the Wrath Warriors that are hunting the Meep all originate from. So my big question going into this was, is this going to canonize the original comic appearance of these figures, or is it going to adapt them? The difference would have been determined by, is the Doctor going to recognize them, or is the Doctor not going to know what the deal with the Wrath Warriors and the Meep is initially? It was the latter, which means this is adapting the comic works rather than continuing directly on from them, which is probably the safer thing to do, because you can get away with canonizing Big Finish. Canonizing the comics is probably a lot messier. So just choosing to adapt it, that was probably a good call. I mean, the general relationship Doctor Who, since its revival, has had with the extraneous media, be it Big Finish, be it comics, be it novels, is basically, if it doesn't contradict what's in the show, you can consider it canon, but we reserve the right to contradict it or adapt it for the first time for the show at a later date. I mean, they did it with this. They did it with the Big Finish audio Jubilee, which created Dalek back in Series 1. They did it with Paul Cornell's book, which was the basis for Human Nature and Family of Blood, which was initially a novel about the Seventh Doctor. But regardless, it's kind of nice seeing them pull from those sources again, because that was largely something done during RTD's initial era. Russell T Davies, who's running the show and ran it during the initial revival and is now doing so again. So it's kind of nice to have that assurance that he's willing to dip into these sources again. When Stephen Moffat ran the show, he didn't really seem to do that to me, at least not to my memory. Nothing that stood out heavily at any rate. And Chibnall didn't seem to do it at all. Now, it's not automatically a good thing, but it was something that I didn't necessarily expect to ever come back. And I kind of like that it has here. So we have the Meep. The Meep pleads to Rose. This whole thing of oh, they're after the Meep. And, being all cute and snuggly. And suddenly we have possessed unit soldiers who appear to be after the Meep, but also the Wrath Warriors are after the Meep. And eventually the reveal being the Meep is a vicious dictatorial monster who has possessed a whole bunch of unit soldiers. So we get that twist, which I knew was coming because I knew enough about the Meep to know that was going to happen. But I imagine it was probably kind of fun for folks who didn't know. I mean, I can't speak from the position of not knowing. I imagine a decent number of them would have guessed at some point, but I feel like it's paced and built well. And then it's just a matter of dealing with the Meep before the Meep gets into the rocket that it came in, and that thing has a takeoff mechanism that will basically destroy all of London in order to power itself back up into space, which, yeah, okay, that's a legit threat. And Donna's getting dragged along through this. Rose is getting dragged along through a chunk of this, and there's the concern about Donna remembering because of what happened to her back with the ending of Series 4, that she'd had the consciousness of a Time Lord poured into her, and if she remembers, that's too much for one person. It's going to basically burn her from the inside out. And so we've got all these things, and here's our adventure. I like the tone. I like the tone on this thing a lot. It is light enough, but it does hit proper emotional moments and weights, especially around the Doctor and Donna, and the Doctor in general, just re-encountering these people and having these moments. And so there's a moment referencing Wilf, who doesn't appear in this episode. I'm kind of expecting to show up in the next one. The late Bernard Cribbins did shoot, I believe, everything that they needed from him before he passed away, but we'll see if they do actually include it. But I do enjoy just the references that it turns out he's basically in accommodated housing provided by UNIT.
She's looking after Wilf. Brilliant. Brilliant.
I love the idea that UNIT is just going to take care of him. Because, I mean, old soldier, yes, veteran. But beyond that, for what he did for the Doctor, yeah. No, we'll take Guy's 95. We'll take care of him. Don't worry. I just like that. I like the Doctor's reaction to it. Actually, let me back up. I had kind of briefly mentioned that my thoughts on this version of the opening credit theme was it's very Series 4 version. It wasn't really anything new, which in and of itself is fine. But how well it was going to work for me was going to kind of depend on the visuals that went along with it. This is great. This feels more open. It feels grander. It feels like more of a spectacle. It looks more wondrous. And if you're going to go with something with definitive visuals, as opposed to, say, what happened during Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker's era, which was more abstract, which I did also really like. But if you're not going to go abstract and you're going to go with definitive visuals, I love the grandeur and the splendor of this. And they've tried to integrate, like, the sense of the greater universe in some of these opening titles before. They did it towards the end of Matt Smith's era, and it didn't quite click for me then, but it really does now. I love these opening credits. I'll be curious to see if they keep them or if they alter them when we get the switch to Shudigatwa. And I'll say right now, I'm going to wonder whether that's also going to be the case for the sonic screwdriver and for the TARDIS interior. I'm assuming not the TARDIS interior, because that would be a big expense to only use for 3 specials and then completely redesign, but I'll come back to the TARDIS interior. But since I brought it up, why don't we talk about the sonic screwdriver? I like the new uses we see for this, and I say that as someone who has felt in the past that the Sonic kind of became too all-purpose. I felt that especially during Eleven's tenure when it was Matt Smith, but one of the things I really liked about Christopher Eccleston and the original David Tennant run was that it felt like it had a number of very specific functions, a pretty high number of specific ones, and this feels a little bit more like that. But even though we're getting this whole new thing where, like, it can kind of draw thing is like it's a map or it's a shield, that could have been overpowered. That could have been like, oh great, there's a massively useful utility function for this thing. But the thing is, like, it takes him a while to do it, so it can't be thrown up quickly. And I think that's a good way to nerf what would otherwise be too useful an ability for him to just have in his pocket. So I think and like really the only reason it works here is because the possessed unit soldiers and the Wrath Warriors are too busy shooting at each other to focus on the Doctor and the Noble family. So that works for me, because while I think the function in and of itself, like, that's kind of too useful and too all-purpose for the Doctor to have, but he can't throw it up quickly. So I think that is going to be a good explanation for why, hopefully, we don't see him abuse this as a function of the screwdriver in future. So that's the kind of thing I like from it. Like, I did appreciate during Jodie Whittaker's era that it was primarily used just as a scanner. I liked paring it back down to that. You know, it just sometimes opened doors and it mainly scanned stuff. I did like that simplifying, but if we're going to add more functions to it, especially if they seem super useful, I think it's a good idea to give it a downside, and having it take a while to draw this thing in the air, that's a suitable downside. You know, it's balancing your mechanics. So one character in the game isn't completely OP, and I decided to go with video game terms there for a second. I don't know why. We're going to move on. I'm going to reiterate right now that I would have really liked if they had David Tennant use his natural Scottish accent in this form as the Doctor, because one of the concerns that I've had about this Doctor is that it is just going to feel like the 10th Doctor again. And it's not going to feel like its own distinct entity that has to figure out why it looks like an older one. But this really does just feel like him. And from a nostalgia standpoint, that's not the worst thing in the world, but from a storytelling and like mapping the overall journey of the Doctor and the way that they're different, like, it's disappointing. I was really kind of hoping for more to distinguish him and make it clear how he's different other than just the experiences he's had since the last time he had this face. And right now, so far at least, this mostly feels like the only difference is the stuff he's been through. Personality-wise, seems pretty much like the same guy, which dynamic-wise, in terms of bouncing off of Don and slipping back into that dynamic, yeah, I do get why they went that way. They didn't want to alter a beloved dynamic between Doctor and companion. So I do kind of get it, but I still find it a little bit disappointing there. Okay, something else I need to address. So we have a sort of a higher up in unit who appears in this, who is a wheelchair user. I do like her. I actually especially like that early on, they have this whole thing where, like, the soldiers are going to check out the upper portion of this rocket, and they have to go up these stairs, and one of them just looks at her and goes, oh, sorry. And her response is just like, don't wait for me. Go, do your job, which is perfect.
Sorry about the stairs, but Geneva says to go in immediately.
Don't make me the problem, just get in there.
And also, it becomes a narrative necessity that she not be up there with the rest of them because they all get possessed and she doesn't. So the other thing I need to address in regards to this is if you saw my earlier video about the whole thing with Davros and what was done with him and the Children in Need Special, one of the things I mentioned there is my preference to the kind of alteration that RTD may have done with Davros. Again, I did a whole video on it, but short version being like Davros is a character traditionally heavily scarred and in a mobility aid. And for the purposes of that short, he was neither. Now, depending on how it's done moving forward, that can be treated as like a one-off thing, or it could be how he is depicted going forward. There's wiggle room for both to happen. But one of the things I mentioned when I talked about that was my preference to trying to just fix a problematic trope, the problematic trope being evil people with clear visible disabilities. And I don't have the time to parse all of that. Again, I did a whole video on disability representation. So if you're confused as to that, go check out that video. I don't eat up my comments with that question here as to why that's a problem. Just understand it's a thing. So my preference to just altering a character more often than not is to provide counterexamples, which this does. And what I'm hoping that means is that RTD or anyone else won't feel the need for the unscarred and bipedal version of Davros to be the new default because we can't lean into the trope we were trying to avoid. I'm hoping that the presence of a counterexample like this woman who's kind of heading up the unit group, I'm hoping that that's what they'll lean into more, because this is exactly what I said is the better way to do it. Provide counterexamples so that the only people using mobility aids aren't all monsters. So it was nice to see her, but even beyond that, I'm sure some people have and will cry, oh, it's just forced diversity and it's woke and it's blah, 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 blah. Like, I haven't watched any of the people who are going to say that. I know they are, though. And there's other stuff, particularly around Rose. I'm sure they're going to freak out. I don't need to see it. I know what they say. They always say the same stuff. We'll get to Rose. But I think she's just a good character. And I think she's well utilized. And I think her disability is integrated interestingly and into both the character and the narrative. Like, she doesn't make a big deal out of it. The soldier kind of makes a bigger deal out of it than she does. And being in unit, she's built utility into this thing. That makes perfect sense to me. I like her. I hope she shows up again. I'm a little bit torn later on with sort of how the Meeps plan gets undone in reverse, because like there's these cracks forming, and like first of all we have the highly convenient thing that all these cracks appear to be branching out and going down the streets and obeying that, so we're not seeing houses split in half. And then when the whole thing's reversed, not only is there no longer this fiery doom coming up from these cracks, the cracks actually close themselves. It feels a little clean. It feels a little just, okay, why'd you have it be that much damage in the first place if you're just going to undo it immediately, which is something RTD has done a couple times. But that having been said, I will kind of take it as a little bit of palate cleanser from the fact that Chibnall during the Jodie Whittaker era had a tendency to just cause a lot of damage and not deal with it. So like, if you're not going to deal with it, I suppose reversing it is better than just forgetting that you destroyed a huge chunk of the universe and never addressing it again, which is what Chibnall did. So it didn't bother me as much as it might have. I think only because we were coming off the back of the era of an era that handled collateral damage and destruction from the villains worse than this. So I don't love it, but it is better. So let's talk about Rose. First of all, Rose is a trans character played by a trans actor. Good. That's the baseline. Thank you. So already off to a solid start. The ways in which it is established that she is trans, I am 50-50 on. There is one scene that I think is handled beautifully, and there's one that I'm like, I'd rather you hadn't done that. And it's not, again, not the worst thing in the world, but like, I don't know if RTD consulted any trans people to like do a pass on the script, but here's the note I would have given if I had been asked for my input specifically on this aspect. I love how absolutely dead set supportive Rose's entire family is. The scene that I mentioned that I think is handled incredibly well that establishes Rose as trans is with Donna's mother. Because Donna's mother, not in Rose's presence, but once Rose is gone, is like second guessing her interactions, using a term like gorgeous. Is that too stereotypically feminine? Am I reinforcing stereotypes? Is that what she wants to hear? And like that uncertainty, I think, especially from somebody of her generation, I've seen like she wants to do it right, but she has a lot of self-confidence issues about whether or not she is doing it right. And I think that scene rang very true for especially older members, older generations who want to be supportive but feel awkward about it. I thought that was very well done.
I just get so clumsy. I know. So do I.
The scene leading into it with the boys on the street yelling at Rose, I don't think it was wrong to include them yelling, because that is regrettably also true to the trans experience in both the US and the UK. Just a lot of harassment and a lot of nonsense. I really would have preferred that they hadn't yelled Rose's birth name. I'm not going to say dead name because we don't know for certain if she considers it that. Like, for example, I go by Vera. My birth name is Nathaniel. I don't consider it a dead name. I do still use it in some situations, and it doesn't make me dysphoric. The dead name specifically means you're dysphoric about it and you don't want to hear it anymore. It seems like Rose probably leans closer to dead name, but we don't know for sure, so I'm just opting to call it birth name. I really would have rather, though, that we hadn't heard, like, they could have yelled, hey, dude, nice dress, or, oh, bro, cool makeup, like, because, to be honest, that's the kind of stuff I get in my comments by the dozens, literally every morning. Every morning I come on here and I have to spend the first 15 minutes or so of my day clearing out those comments. So like you could go, oh, it's generic and unoriginal. Yeah, so are transphobes. So you want to be accurate to the experience, that works. Now, would kids who are trying to be transphobic, who know her birth name, would they have yelled at her? Yes, but the reason I would rather it wasn't there is I don't like giving ammunition to jerk viewers who are now going to dead name the character just to be jackasses. Like, they were gonna misgender her regardless, but now they also have a name to stick to it. And that's ammunition you didn't need to give them. And I say ammunition as if it actually matters. Like, in my view, the opinions of such people don't matter. They legitimately do not. But I still think that was unnecessary. I've had similar thoughts in other cases. Like, there was a comic I read a couple years ago that had a non-binary character, and I really liked that. But what bugged me was that at one point in the story, it was confirmed what that character's gender assigned at birth was. And that was really disappointing because especially in the comic book medium where you don't have a voice to cue off of and it's just an artistic rendering, they really had the opportunity to have a non-binary character that that any jerk audience members couldn't accurately misgender because they don't know what the character's gender assigned at birth was, and because it's just an artistic rendering, you can't be sure. Character was fairly androgynous, and it just bummed me out that they kind of lost that ability to lean into that. And I kind of have similar feelings here. Like, it's not wrong that we found out what her birth name was, but it also wasn't necessary, and I would kind of rather it wasn't there. I've spent longer on this point than I wanted to, but it was one of those things that kind of required explanation. So don't take the amount of time I've spent talking about this to be reflective of how deeply I feel about it. I actually don't think it's that big a deal. It's just a small note. That's actually kind of the sort of thing that's going to happen a bit with Rose. I have a lot of opinions on trans representation. Shock of shocks. So I might linger on some of this more than is actually reflective of how prominent these feelings are for me in regards to the thing overall. But just in general, the supportive family, the way she's portrayed, the other, the younger kid from the block who's just, calling her Rose and getting all excited. It was great. I'll be curious to see if they bring that boy back because he gets a little bit more prominence than I think was required for his use here, which seemed to primarily be just have a character we recognize reacting to the cracks coming down the street and whatnot. That might be all we get from him, but who knows? We'll see. So, the Doctor Donna. The Doctor unlocking this aspect of Donna. First of all, I like that it has already started leaking through. Like her running back to help him is because that instinct is still there. Like it's buried. She can't remember most of it, but it leaks out little bits. And I love that the first thing she does when he unlocks all her memories is get mad at him for the lingering sense of the doctor's moral compass that was stuck in her, that was still there, gave her the impulse to give away all the lottery money. I love that her first reaction is to be pissed at him for that.
I gave it away to be like you, so I could be kind, so I could be nice, so I could be helpful. Why?
That's very Donna. Because, like, while the giving it all away, like, it gave me a warm feeling. There was part of me that, like, would she, though? And this basically establishes, like, no, she wouldn't. Fully within her own faculties and not influenced by this background aspect of the doctor that was in her head. No, she wouldn't have. And she knows that. And she's ticked.
166 million pounds.
Yes, Donna, but destruction of London?
Oh, I'll show you destruction, mate.
That was really good. And just, I get why the Dr. Donna kind of can't be a long-term continuing thing, because that basically gives us two active doctors and one that's permanently on Earth. Why would the doctor ever have to come back to save Earth again if the Dr. Donna's right here? Like, I get why she can't stay that way, but I do still really enjoy when she is the Dr. Donna and bouncing off of Tennant, like, so rapid fire. It's so much fun. I feel good about half of the solution so that Donna does not die. And I was fairly confident she wasn't going to die because there's more specials, and I've seen like behind the scenes footage that seem to indicate some scenes that have not been shown in this yet. But I got genuinely nervous and I got choked up seeing that she might. That felt like a genuine threat. And when she didn't, and we get the reveal of Rose, that basically divided the meta crisis so that it was not as severe, but it was carried in both of them. I actually really like that as a solution. I think that's quite clever. And it's something that I wouldn't have thought of. Obviously, the doctor didn't think of it. He realizes what's happened, but I like that. I think that's clever. And also giving Rose this wonderful, affirming, shining moment that, you know, she is different. Not just for being trans, but for everything that her mother passed on to her. She's different. She's special. Like Donna is, even though Donna didn't think she was special for so long. And I like that. We then have the further and also some of the specific lines that feel slightly muddled. So, like, there's the non-binary thing.
We're binary.
She's not, because the doctor's
Male
and female.
And neither. And more.
And again, one of two things happened here. Either RTD miscommunicated something or doesn't fully understand non-binary. And I don't want to accuse him of one or the other, but here's the reason, like, that line, I don't have an inherent problem with it. And actually, especially as a callback to Donna's whole binary thing from the end of series 4, like,
Binary. Non-binary. Binary.
I get the impulse to do something with that when you have a trans character. But the thing is, everything about Rose's depiction indicated her as being a binary trans woman. And what I mean by that is the gender binary, if you aren't familiar with this concept, is man, woman. Now, non-binary is everything either in between or separate from. So people whose sense of gender does not firmly hit one or the other. And again, this could be a whole other topic. I'm not going to get into it right now, but like, no, it's not just about wanting to wear gender neutral clothes or wanting to be butch if you're a woman. Like, it is about an actual sense of self. So I need you to roll with that. But non-binary is a thing. It is people who fall somewhere in the middle. Gender fluid, which is what I am, is a form of non-binary because yes, sometimes I do feel very, very femme. Other times it's somewhere in the middle and it meanders. My sense of self does not stay put. Then there's also agender, people who feel like I hardly know her. I don't like, no, I don't think I have one. And so like there's multiple forms of non-binary, but the thing is, Rose, as shown here, really appears to be a binary trans woman, moving from one part of the gender binary, which again, gender is not actually a binary, just go with the terminology here, moving from one part of the binary from assigned gender at birth of man to woman. That is a binary transition. So she's not non-binary, at least as you depicted her here. If she is non-binary, you did not establish that. And I think one quick line that could have, if that was the intention, I don't know if it was, but if it was, one quick line that could have covered for that would have been when Sylvia, Donna's mother, was kind of flubbing a little bit, maybe with the pronouns or the name. Donna could have said, you know, it's also okay to call her they if that's better for you. And Sylvia could have been like, no, that's even more confusing because I'm used to that being plural. And again, not to make a joke out of it, but just to acknowledge why it's difficult for her. I think that could have been the chance to easily and quickly establish that she is a non-binary trans person. But you didn't establish that. So the non-binary line sticks out as misapplied, I think. Again, I can't be certain of what his actual intent was, but as depicted, it's not quite landing right. But there's that. Oh, I do want to say this. I'm impressed with the fact that RTD managed to put in a "did you just assume pronouns" joke, and it actually worked. Because that joke pretty much never works. It's largely done by the right to make fun of trans people. Oh, did I assume your pronouns? But even when I've heard people who are trans themselves or are trying to be supportive of trans people make a version of that joke, it always comes off really bad to me. This one I actually think worked. I think that actually worked as a joke because not only did Rose be like, did you just assume pronouns? But the doctor's reaction wasn't to roll his eyes and be like, it was like, oh no, that's a good point.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
True. Yes, sorry, good point. Are you he or she or they?
And I also like that the meep just says the meep. The meep only has proper noun. There are no pronouns for the meep.
My chosen pronoun is the definite article. I am always the meep.
Oh, I do that.
Which also makes it a valid observation from Rose because it actually applied to how the meep talks about the meep and how the meep wants other people to talk about the meep. You could argue it's a neo-pronoun. I think it's just proper noun across the board. Doesn't make use of pronouns. But I was impressed. RTD made that joke actually work and function. So props to that. The one other thing, coming back not only to Rose, but also to Rose and Donna, the dispersing of the sort of Time Lord essence, the idea of just letting it go. That really seems too easy. And the lines associated with it also feel not fully thought through. And again, I'm sure these are some lines that certain kinds of pundits are losing their freaking minds over. But, you know, the lines about...
We've got all that power, but there is a way to get rid of it. Something a male-presenting Time Lord will never understand.
I guess I'm just kind of like... I don't think that has anything to do with anything. And again, if there was a specific intent behind a line like that, it's not well communicated. I think the impression is that just the way that the Doctor, particularly when the Doctor is a man, tends to think is a little bit too rigid to have the sort of mental mobility to come up with a slightly more out-of-the-box solution, which to be fair, Donna also didn't come up with on her own, because Donna, when she first became the Dr. Donna in series 4, it's not like she suggested this. It's not like she knew that this was a possibility either. So it feels like it's meant to be like the additional understanding of you aren't stuck as one thing and you can just change who you are to become something that is healthy for you if what you are currently is not. That understanding from Rose added to this sort of split of the Dr. Donna, that might be what gives the idea of like, we can just let it go. Kind of like how Rose would have had to just let go of whatever masculinity she felt burdened by. I think that might have been the idea, or at least that's the mental work that I'm doing to come up with a version of this interaction that fully clicks. Because when it happened, I was kind of like, wait, what? And I think that's just the dialogue back and forth might have needed some fine tuning and might have needed another pass just for clarity, because it seems written for more punchy lines, but the punchier lines aren't communicating the idea, assuming I'm even right about what the idea is. If the idea was meant to be something else altogether, then it really needed some clarification, because even my attempt to sort of headcanon what it is that's going on, if even that is wrong, then okay, I really don't know what you were doing, and that need to be more properly communicated. I'm not gonna like go off on a whole thing and like, making it all this gender stuff. Like, I do think there is a way that tying it to a trans understanding of existence, that like you don't have to hold on to this stuff. You can just let it go. I think there is a way to make that idea work. It just isn't quite pulled off here. But it didn't weigh me down to the point that I'm like, oh, God. I wasn't rolling my eyes. I was just slightly confused. And again, I feel like if there wasn't, and maybe there was, I don't know, but if there wasn't a trans person consulted for these specific aspects of the story, that maybe there should have been. Maybe there was. I don't know. But overall, I think the finding a way to give Donna her memories back, but also remove the fact that it was going to kill her, was nice to see. Like I have said in the past that there was a beautiful tragedy to her exit in series 4, and I stand by that. But I'm also now at an age where I'm like, okay, tragedy can have beauty to it, but could we have more happy endings, please? And this gives me that, and I'm happy for it. I'm a little bit annoyed that Rose was not allowed to go in the TARDIS. I suspect the reason is just like the adventure for the next episode is meant to just be the Doctor and Donna. But like, I'm a little annoyed. Like, you could have at least let her in to see the thing, even if you were then going to shoo her out before the whole thing with the coffee, which I did laugh. I did legitimately crack. Like, that's a cheap joke, but dang it, it worked. So the TARDIS interior took me a little bit to get used to, because I've seen the TARDIS this white before back in classic era Doctor Who, but when it's been this white, that room, the control room, was smaller significantly. So seeing it that expansive and that white made it feel kind of empty in a way that I'm not sure I love. Like, the TARDIS interior has been this big before. The TARDIS interior for Eccleston and Tennant's first run was a bit cramped. And that worked, that was fine. But it felt bigger with Matt Smith, his initial design, but it was just loaded with quirky stuff. And then it had the redesign, and when it was Smith in there, it was okay. But then when Peter Capaldi's Doctor was in there were like bookshelves and a bust of Beethoven and a chalkboard, and like, there was stuff in it. It didn't feel empty. And then the 13th Doctor's TARDIS interior was just so busy, I never really had a solid sense of how big the thing even was, to be completely honest. But this right now, as presented, like, we're getting a good look at it. I'm hoping there will be stuff in it, because it just feels kind of empty. That having been said, I like that the round things light up in colors. That's a cool touch. I dig that. And that did help. Once I saw that, I'm like, oh, okay, so it won't be all white all the time. We can get, some mood lighting, basically, for lack of a better way to put it in here. And I'm down for that. It's, for how big it is, it feels kind of empty. That said, seeing David Tennant run around in it was both thrilling and exhausting. I'm watching him going, Oh, I would lose my breath so quickly trying to run that excitedly around there. Oh, I'm old now. Here we are. Couple of quick things. I like that the 2 Wrath Warriors who died get acknowledged. They get named and then they get recognized again at the end.
Sergeant Zogroth and Constable Zrig gave their lives.
Because RTD did have a problem with treating the loss of non-human life kind of flippantly during his initial run. He didn't do it all the time, but it happened sometimes, and I like that it doesn't happen here. Also, random question, was anyone else's sound mix like a little bit off? I had to turn the subtitles on. The dialogue got drowned out sometimes. Was that just me? Let me know. I think I've touched on everything in terms of the specifics. So broad thoughts, this was fun. This had the energy that I wanted RTD to bring back. This is a bit nostalgic, but while I've said I really hope that RTD doesn't just try and bring back, try and recapture the glory days of his original run and does some new things and new ideas and new directions with the show overall, I am prepared to kind of table that until Ncuti Gatwa takes over the role, because bring Tennant back, it's going to be more nostalgic. It's going to deliberately feel more like the old stuff. So I'm okay with it here that this is more evocative of his older era, but it feels appropriate for, anniversary specials, something that is meant to be celebratory, something that is bringing back an old Doctor, bringing back an old companion, an old dynamic. Like, okay, I will let the nostalgia sweep me up here. When we get to Ncuti Gatwa, please give me something newer than this. But for right now, this is nice. This is comfort viewing. This is a warm hug of an episode, and yeah, I like it. It'd be an overstatement for me to say that I love it, but I do like it. And I'll be curious to see what the next one brings, because my suspicion is that this one is meant to be, the warm reintroduction, and things are going to get a bit darker next time. We'll see. But those are my thoughts on the Star Beast. It's a good time. Couple of notes on some of the specifics, but overall, yeah, this had an energy that I was happy to exist in for an hour. What did you think about this? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and is why I'm able to do this as my living. I'm sorry that I got this out a little bit later than I had wanted to. I had a very busy weekend, but I will try to have these reviews out by Sunday, the day following their airing. I can't promise that, but that is my goal. I'm hoping that this is the only one that's going to be out on a Monday. But also as a reminder and a heads up, this does mean that I'm not currently planning on doing the normal Saturday videos for the next couple weeks because I have to do quick turnarounds on this. Additional videos might happen if something comes up and I have thoughts or whatever else, but that is the current plan. So stick around, like, share, subscribe. Those help me out if you are already supporting me on the Patreon, or you can't afford it. That's fair too. But what I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I am just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Time to thank some patrons, and this time I'm going to say their names as if I'm greeting them, welcoming them to a party. Robin Moore, Zuman Lafula, Goddess Elida, Tarak, the thing that goes don't get in the anime, Ruth, Gozer the Gozerian, Oliver B, Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Fernabulax the Poodle, Robin Powell, T-Love, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Rosalind Bennett. Have fun tonight, and thank you for your support. I don't know why I decided to do that this time, but I don't know. I'm having fun.